Coming to you live from the 8th Annual CP Tech Forum at the Grand Connaught Rooms in London, this is the Circuit Magazine podcast.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the number one source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Unpredictable Travel Risk Management, a live panel discussion recorded with Chris Story, Axel Wochinger, Per Jansson, Ivan Ivanovich and Marcus Stephens-Ofner at our 8th Annual CP Tech Forum in the Grand Connaught Rooms in London. This is a special edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast where we thought, let's bring one of the most exciting topics to life for you, the Circuit Magazine listeners, who either just attended the forum or have yet to go, but would love to get a slice of the action. We were delighted to welcome Chris Story over here, along, of course, with Chuck Randolph, most famous for Conversations in Close Protection, running the whole Close Protection conference in Vegas, and, of course, being on our podcast before. And it was a great pleasure to see so many of you attend this year's event. We had more attendees than we've ever had before, but also more internationals from a lot of countries, and also listeners of the podcast. Thank you for approaching us and saying, well, that you enjoyed it. And yes, you had ideas for new content, but it was wonderful to get that feedback. We're bringing you a recording directly from the conference, focusing on the evolution of travel risk management, whether or not it was ever predictable. Does it make sense to talk about unpredictable travel risk management? What are we going to do about it? And will tech help us? I'm thrilled that so many people made it for the 8th iteration of the forum. I don't think I could envisage it being this big and this popular 8 years ago when we started it. And, that's down to you, the community, and also the wider listenership, giving us more ideas and more topics to really grapple with looking at the modern protector. This year, we included more end customers of protectors. We included corporate entities. We included private security, TSCM. But we added topics, including this unpredictability in travel risk management, which, yes, it's a little bit high level. But I think before we start our advanced work or our policies for international travel, we have to really assess today what are safe, quote-unquote, countries, what are not, what are good operating procedures in one country, but maybe not another, how are our own internal biases going to affect the type of work we're prepared to commit in a different place. And I think that is really key. And so having someone from Mexico, someone from the States, someone from Sweden, someone from Germany, I think that really, really makes a difference to give an international flavour. But don't just take my word for it. John and Sean and I were all in the audience for this excellent session. Let's welcome to the podcast the live recording from Chris Story and his excellent panel on unpredictable travel risk management.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit Magazine.
Obviously, this being the 8th Annual CP Tech Forum, we do have a slant towards tech, but there are wider questions which we can sort of apply everything to, the question of modernization. So, I am very pleased to welcome Chris Story, Director of Risk Intelligence and Consulting at Triumph Protection Group, and our wonderful panelists, Axel Wochinger, CEO of the Result Group, Per Jansson, Risk Advisor and Executive Protection Specialist, Exec, Marcus Stephens-Ofner as himself, and Ivan Ivanovich, Vice President, Strategic Services, WSO. And we're going to talk unpredictable travel risk management. I will leave you in Chris Story's capable hands.
Thanks, Phelan. Appreciate you. All right. I'm also told that we're the first or very, very international panel, right? So American, Axel? German? Ivan? Mexican? Per? Swedish? Marcus?
British.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. Boo, what? All right. America. Okay. So because we are an international panel, we're going to talk about unpredictable travel risk. Thank you for your kind attention. That's our slide. So first off, we have to identify really what is unpredictable travel, because for most of us, we get our assignments, on the spot, right? It's just really a matter of what planning is. So once we get past or beyond the resource piece, right? Like, if I find out that we're going to Greece tomorrow, everybody's got to crap a lot of resource, and that falls on a lot of the providers. So as we look at unpredictable travel, what are some of the challenges around that, aside from gathering resources? Alex, you want to jump on that first? Yeah, so you pass the microphone.
Yeah, thank you. I think looking on it from a bigger perspective, we're living in times that are more uncertain. The situation globally is more volatile, so getting ready for the travel puts a higher challenge to those who are carrying it out. The political situation in many countries is different. Things happen with no unpredictable, and that's much more difficult to establish the certain situational awareness that you require for the operational work on the ground.
Okay, so from that, at least I hear that we kind of need to maintain a pulse on our overall areas of operations, but the situation awareness on the ground is, we find that. I'm not going to be focused on Greece. I'm not going to Greece or wherever. Okay, that makes sense. So from there, like, how do we get a handle on that? What technology do you use to get a handle on what's going on to keep you situationally aware? Ivan?
Thank you very much. So first, when we're talking about unpredictable risks, in that case, it's kind of a semantic question, because if we consider predictable, that's something that we can predict step by step what's going to happen, then it's definitely unpredictable. But if we understand it, it's a probability that something's going to happen, that it's pretty much predictable, depending on where we are operating on. Of course, because if we can predict something, then we can manage that, but we can't manage that risk. So that's very important to take into consideration. So first, what we do is the intelligence on the area that we are going to operate, and that's very important, both OSINT and all kind of intelligence that's on our hands, so that can make us, at least when we operate in Latin America, to have a specific report for each one of the crimes, that's most common to happen when we operate. So, for example, carjacking, we have a lot of Latin America, street crime and whatever, but they can tell you, okay, that can happen all the time. Well, that happens all the time, but not with the same frequency. So we can define the specific places and specific time when the specific threat has more frequency, so we can start our planning together with executive, because in executive protection, sometimes we think that the most important thing is know how to shoot or whatever, but the most important skill is to convince and to talk with your principals. So once you know already what's your intelligence, what's the best plan to operate and work, so you can help the plan and reduce the risk by avoiding the areas and times when when that threats are most frequent.
Okay, so basically we're not saying we have a crystal ball, but just like the excellent presentation for open source intelligence earlier was, there are patterns that we can see, we can understand areas that we're going into, demographics, et cetera. And for any of you that know Filippo Marino's study about our ability to predict risk versus the average person, executive protectors think that we're really, really good at it, but we're really not. So we kind of have to use those tools, like you said, like let me see what's on the ground. Let's get ground reporting, but let's also look at the patterns, time of day, location, et cetera, that have impacts. And so some of those risks you might not be able to identify when they're going to happen, but you know when they're more likely to happen, correct? Okay, great. So what tools do we use for those? We'll just go in order, Per. Or what tools do you use? What tools do you recommend?
the tools I recommend would be having someone local on ground, because my background is from governmental, so we never travel without having that country that we're going into. We need someone to be our receiver in that country. And that you can do that as well in the private sector. It's only building your network and not depending on someone who's subcontracting, someone who is subcontracting, someone who is subcontracting. You need to have someone in your network that you trust, and then go meet them. And preferably, if you can send a team in advance, that's what you want to. But that's not always the case, because the unpredictability is that I'm going tomorrow. So the tools I would need, I would use network as a great tool to manage that.
What about technology? What technology, or even just websites, might you go to kind of figure out at least the overall general threat, and then what might be a specific threat?
Well, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't tell you the web pages because I don't know them. I have a team for that, but I would say that generally, all the technical support would be a secondary method, as we talked about before as well. And the best example of that is, like, if you have you need to have a map and a compass, and you can use the GPS for support, but I would never trust that technical support as a primary method, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right. So, for example, I think some of us will go to like the State Department website or the ministry websites, right, that tell us like what crime is in, at least at the country level, right? And then from there, we need to understand what happens at the city or state level, and then the city level, right? So, go on.
Sure, and that also there's a problem with that, because if for my hometown, for example, Stockholm, if you go on a like external some other country or some of the companies that produce risk reports, the Stockholm looks like a red zone right now. That you wouldn't go in without the long guns and everything, but in reality it's not. So then back to take the technical support, but you need boots on the ground. You need to go there. You need to talk to people who actually is on location. That's
okay. And I think it's important to note too that most of those, when they use their risk score, the highest level threat becomes the whole threat for the country, right? And so then our executives that we support are saying, no, you're overreacting to this. And that's one of the things that we're held accountable to go, like, yep, scariest environment imaginable, we can't go. And the on-the-ground reporting helps us out. And I think it works two ways as well, is that on-the-ground reporting can tell you, no, it's not a war zone. It's a war zone in this one place, because we're getting crazy news reports, right? There's thousands of people here, and there's like 6 people behind them, picketing or whatever the case is. So that helps verify.
That actually happened in Davos last week. We got it like intel that was almost a riot, and like 4 people. Jackie, you were there.
Job security. Okay, great. So, Marcus, any other tools aside from people on the ground and the government websites? How do we get more clarity about what we can try to predict from a travel perspective?
I just want to start by saying we're embracing some real beard diversity here on this panel here. We've got clean shaven over there, and we've got the beard squad here, so, and yourself. Don't want to go over old ground, but as has been said, so you can get an overview of what's happening in the country, but the thing you always narrow down is, okay, what's being reported and what is actually happening on the ground. So you can go on there and you can say, right, you can do an incident trawl. So I've used Control Risk Court. Yeah, it's a subscription, but there's a lot of free platforms out there. CI World Factbook, FCO. Quick word on the FCO. Not too sure if it's State Department as well. If they receive a threat, they have to legally put it on their site for that country. So it's worth noting. By law, the British government, if they learn of a threat, goes on their website. So stay on top of that one. But you can also go Lonely Planet Guide. There's a sea of information out of it. It's how you cherry pick it. Do a broad sweep, get a good picture. But once again, and it's a thing that's happened throughout my career, what someone says, sat in an office in DC or sat in an office in London saying you got to do this, that, and the other, go to the ground source. And again, the media, unfortunately, we'll paint a picture. You're talking about Davos. I can go back, it's a few years old now, Hong Kong. Hong Kong, when I went there in 2019, place was on fire, riots. I was at Mong Kok police station watching stuff flying around me. I could see people a block away or a street away dressed up for dinner and going sat down in a nice restaurant. But sexy news, stills, and all the rest of it. And it paints a picture there, but what is actually happening? And going in too hard and thinking, right, we need armoured vehicles, we need this, that raises the risk to there. And a quick one, I could approach it from the corporate, and I can approach it from the commercial level. In corporate, you have a duty of care, not just the executives, to everyone travelling, you have a duty of care to those people, and you have to prepare them. What's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is you didn't prepare them, something happened, and let's say it's a lethal event. So it's a catastrophic event. 3 years from now, you as a travel risk manager or whoever, you're in the stand at the inquest, and they're going to say, how did you prepare that traveller for that trip? And if you haven't got the answers at the exec level, unlimited fines and or prison. So if you want a lever for your C-suite, no executive wants to go to prison for something they weren't even involved in. But that is a way to leverage. I can go back to one of the previous panels. A lot of discussions are subjects that problems about security culture. I was hearing those same discussions 30 years ago. What's changed? How do we change? How do we help change? Because we're all learning, and so I'm sort of going off on a tangent, nothing new there. But how do we help enable business? You know, one great saying I heard, you know, the security department's the department of no. No, you can't do that, as you say. No, you can't do this, can't do that. You're there to enable business. You can't just say, no, you can't do that. Look at the trip, look and see, right, okay, and work with the travellers who will not have the training, who will not have the awareness. That's what you're there. You're there to advise. You're a security advisor. And you're there to say, right, okay, let's look at it. We'll work with you, but we're here to enable business to happen. You might need a few extra control measures. Tech helps. But again, as you said, it's just a tool. You can need a balance of the two from there. I'll let you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'd like to go back to your point about the prison piece. I just say that probably nobody really wants to go to prison, right? Whether you did it or not. You know, at least that's my view. So I think what you're saying is, and what everybody's really saying is, and this kind of aligns with Jackie's point, which is we have to do our due diligence, right? If you go off the news or whatever's being tweeted, and you're saying, hey, it's a war zone, a section is a war zone, right? And I think we want to make sure that we don't overstate the security situation on the ground because we lose trust with the executives that we support. And then the other piece that you guys had kind of mentioned is, you know, being prepared and then having a crisis management plan in the event of, right, if things go sideways. Another theme that's coming out is that we've got some old school folks, right? You mentioned, hey, 30 years ago, what's changed, right? So what has changed is a lot of technology and the ability to use it, but not over-rely on it, right? I get that piece, right? I still need to use a map and compass, but at the end of the day, we also rode horses, and now we drive cars. So at what point do we change gears to trust the technology that we have out there? Because as we have a technology or close protection technology conference, everybody's like, oh, it's got to be a guy on the ground. Well, what other tools are out there that we can trust, and then put those together, like Marcus was saying about a balance between technology and the human factor, because humans are fallible, and so is technology. How do we make that stronger for unpredictable, even predictable travel risk? Axel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in general, keeping a bit of the old school approach is never bad. I mean, there's probably you've heard this case study of Maersk that had a massive cyber attack, and the only reason they were kind of able to do that crisis management in a proper way was because they had their crisis management plan in paper printout somewhere in a shelf. All the other stuff was gone. They couldn't use anything like that. Yesterday, MS Teams had a global outage. A lot of companies use MS Teams to do their crisis management. So the example of having a compass and a map is always important, and I think that is true for all the technology that is on the market. A lot of people rely for the individual traveler on those nice travel apps where they get push messages, but that stuff doesn't work if the mobile the network is down. The good old text message might still go through as a warning tool or as a means of communication. So not over-rely on technology and I think everyone who's coming from the military kind of subscribes to that, because you always use the easy stuff that has always worked well.
Okay, one of the things that comes to mind is from a balance perspective, right, is that if I need to run a route, I can map my route. Depending on what tool I use, I can actually run the route or see visuals along the route. But at the end of the day, I also want somebody to run the route because it might change, right? So from my perspective, that's a great use of technology and, the old school mentality that you got to see it, verify it, execute it, right, Axel?
Absolutely. I mean, Google Maps, Waze, all those tools are great and make life much easier. But you might have, the system might be down. So do your advanced, do your recce, be familiar with the route, and maybe have a paper map still with you. Then you have your fallback option if technology is not working.
All right. So a lot of times we look at technology, and really I could use what Chat GP or whatever it is to write my advance port. Has anybody done that yet? I know somebody has. Nobody wants to claim it? Okay. Well, that might be, in the future, that might be, you ask it, hey, what are the routes? What is this? What is that? And then you go verify it, right? Using those tools. What does that look like for you guys, right? Because everybody's like, nope, I'm going to trust, but I'm going to verify. Okay. So where do we draw the line?
Well, first, just about technology in general, you're looking at the executive protection operations, and you see the guys with the radio and their phones. It's like, come on, it's like 60 years old technology. And it's everybody knows you are an agent, etc. So right now, the important manufacturer had a specific phones, or it could be a phone and it could be on the app. So you have your phone, your app, you just have a regular earphone, and you make your group, and you can have several groups, and you just push the talk, and it's much more easier. Nobody realizes who you are, not necessarily. You have more reach, etc. So from my point of view, it's one of the best things that happened lately for executive protection. And the question you said, I'm going to give the example that we are working in the Central America last year, and the Google Maps and Waze, we need to go to a factory that is next to the territory of Mara gangs, Mara Salvatrucha gang. It's huge territory, and the factory is next to it. And so there is a mistake inside the Google Maps or whatever. So if you put the address of the factory in the Waze, instead of taking you to the factory, it's going to take you directly to the center of the Mara gang territory. And you're lost. And then if that happens, they need to call the chief security of the plant and to rescue the guy and give the money to the Maras to let him go. So you cannot just say, okay, you should use you put it on Waze, and no, you in the specific area. That's why we're talking about that. We first need intelligence. We first need to know where we are going, what kind of threats we have, because the Mara doesn't want to hurt you if you go to the factory. The factory is important for them because most of their families are working on that factory, so they won't damage them. They want to make trouble on that. But nevertheless, if you just run into, then you're lost. So that's the important. We need to know where we are going, how to operate. We check it, but we need to do the advance and the balance, both the technology, the operations, and our knowledge on the ground. Sorry for stealing the time.
Yeah, so there's another theme that's coming here, is that strategically maybe we use intelligence tools, open source intelligence, other tools, paid tools, free tools. Operationally, we probably use a little bit, but we introduce the human factor, and then tactically, we really focus on the human factor. So I would say it's probably 70-30 at the top, and then 30-70 technology on the bottom, right? We still use those communication tools. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so Per, what else would you introduce to that from a technology piece at the operational level, right? So bridging the gap, so almost like 50-50. And I know you have people for this, but it was a strong flex earlier. You said, I got people that take care of that.
Yeah. That was more covering up my own not so good skills at that. So I'm not sure I understand the question. But
So So strategically, we use a lot of tools, right? Technology, and then tactically, we don't. We focus on the map and compass piece, right? Trust but verify. But the middle ground operationally is you're managing your teams or multiple teams, right? Whether in a corporation or a provider. What tools can we use for travel? Or what tools do you use? Like, for example, tracking tail numbers. I can know what teams are in the air. Tracking flights, what teams are in the air, which teams are on the ground. I can use my phone, right, to film routes, right? And then if a route's change, I can add to that databases, all these things, resources for the tactical teams to draw from. So what other tools from a travel perspective do you use or you're aware of, or that you're not aware of that you need, which I think would be important as well?
I understand. Yeah, so things that we do use, of course, is the standard communication things. We use the encrypted apps, Signal or WhatsApp and stuff like that. What we use a lot when we are in an area that we are not familiar with, we use What 3 Words, which is a great mapping to share positions and things like that. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's really good. It's free. And also for comms, we tend to be. We have been using phones for comms, but it's a mess. Even if you have the apps, because there's a lot of things happening especially if you're a team leader. There's different types of apps for communication, and someone tries to call you, and you are at the same time trying to talk radio. So we tend to go back to radio again. Just the hybrid ones with both 4G and UHF, which were really good. We tried them like last week, and they work really fine. And the earpieces now are so small, so you can choose, because sometimes you want to show that you have an earpiece. That's part of the tactics, that you need to show force. And sometimes you don't want anyone to see, and that's possible as well too. You can, with the new radios, you can use iPhone earpieces and whatnot. So that's probably the most we do for positioning and communication. That's the most like technology things we use on the ground. But I also want to, if I can deviate a bit, on preparations, there's a lot of things. We talk about equipment, technical support, intel, and everything, but we need to remember that people that we need to put on the ground are the most important resource, and they need to be trained. And that's something that, I had a discussion earlier today with former colleagues, and that is something I can see from like private sector to government, is that governmental are always like training, because they don't have to worry about it's not a business for them, it's just a job. And for the private sector, we need to do a good job so we be able to like earn money, but we also need to be at a level of proficiency where we also put, that's what we try to do. We try to have people that are trained, because when something happens, I would rather rely on people's skills than equipment or technology. Again, I'm that guy. Sorry.
No problem. No, so that makes sense. I think one of the things that comes to mind too that you mentioned was free tools, right? And I think that's one of the challenges as well, is that if you're running a business, you're like, cool, let's use a free tool, but what's the cost of a free tool, right? Those are the things that we need to be aware of as security folks as well. Then the next question, you could be right up your alley, but I'm going to push it to Marcus, is sometimes technology won't work in areas that we're going. So we've got as we call it, a first world problem of hey, I've got all this high-speed equipment, but either I can't get it in through customs, right, because the timeline is so short, or it just won't work in the area that we're operating in. So what does that look like? Have you ever been hindered by your technology and it just becomes dead weight?
I think the security industry and security professionals have a bit of an issue. Is you need to go to the granular level. Who's my end user? Is my end user a security professional? Are they an intelligence officer? Are they that? Or are they a 21-year-old graduate on their first trip abroad? Yeah, because that's the person at the sharp end. So either you're an advisor. If they've got a team with them, okay, fine. What I will say about technology is, number one, you've got to have buy-in. Yeah, they've got to want it, or they've got to be forced to have it with policy. What you don't want is someone that's in a rural site, vehicle accident, because let's face it, when you travel, most people say, oh, I'm going to be involved in a terrorist attack, or I'm going to be held up. Probably not. You're going to get sick. You're going to fall over, or more likely you're going to be in a vehicle-related incident because the country you're in has poor driving standards. Yeah. So if you don't have that tech on your phone in a greenfield site, that's not when you want to think, oh, what was that app again? And you got no signal. So, you know, from the get-go, you're on a back foot from there. Tracking, or as the Americans like to call it, geospatial awareness. Tracking. So tracking is, it can work for you, it can work against you. The story I tell, I sort of finished up my time in Iraq at an embassy, and we were given a standalone tracker by a very well-known company. We gave it to the ambassador, very good bit of kit, gave it to him, and after a 3-week period, one of the guys went to him and said, how are you finding the tracker? The what? The tracker I gave you. Oh, that thing, it's back in the accommodation in my drawer. Yeah? Because it's on its own is brilliant, but if it's a standalone bit of kit, unless your day-to-day business and role is security, you're going to forget it. You're going to forget to charge it. It's going to get stolen. Or you're just going to like, well, let's talk about tracking, and the big bear in the room is the rumour of, oh, corporate security or Big Brother is watching me. And did you know that they can push a few buttons from the remote office thousands of miles away and your phone starts spying on you? What's going to happen? All that is fast track that phone getting binned in the hotel. Because let's talk about, you know, we like dealing with uncomfortable subjects. Here's an uncomfortable subject. Many people, this is where the human nature, this is where the human effect comes in. Many people, when they go abroad, want to get engaged in activities that they don't want the company or their partner or anyone else knowing about. And it generally revolves around sex and drugs and all the rest, all those touchy subjects that people don't really want to talk about. So if they think my tech is going to spy on me, the one bit of kit that could assist you, it's no good if it's back in your hotel and you're 3 miles down the road in a favela, in trouble. Yeah. So it needs to be simple because, again, end user. Let's use our 21-year-old graduate who's never. To your average, I hate to, you know, decree the up-and-coming people, but for most people that are very young, a crisis to them is the Wi-Fi not working. And it is, and it's unfortunately it's as simple as that. It is all the Wi-Fi is working, headless chicken running around. So what you need to think about in a genuine crisis, when your fine motor skills are closing down and you're running around, what do I do? If that bit of kit you open up, and this is my advice to any companies that deal with that kit, make it as painfully simple as possible. Open that app, see that big red button, push it. That's all you have to do. Yeah, it will go to a GSOC, phone will ring, then we start the process. With the knowledge that that only goes so far. I don't know how many sort of professional kidnap gangs that are going to let you keep your phone. First thing, that's, you're stripped naked, they're doing a search for anything hidden. Quick one on, you mentioned the customs. I briefly explored a covert tracking app on the phone. You get it in there. But what happens if for whatever reason you go to China? Your phone gets taken off you. They interrogate that phone and they find a covert tracking app. So someone that may be there on company business all of a sudden is on espionage charges. Yeah, think about that. But they've got to have it on the phone. Yeah, there's a lot, and you need to approach it in a way where you're winning people over. Yeah, you have to win people over, because if they're like, I'm not doing that, then you're failing from the start. So don't overcomplicate it. I've seen this throughout my career. Security professionals making, it's super Gucci, it's super sexy, it does this, that, and the other. Who's your end user? If your end user's like, well, I don't understand how to use this, it's not going to happen. So it needs to be just KISS. It's a staple plan of everyone's beliefs. Simplify it, because when it goes south and they're in the shit, they're not going to start thinking about, and I've seen some apps of, you got a drop-down menu, this. No, just keep it simple.
Okay, so KISS principle, and then you've got to make sure that the technology works twofold, right? So end user, but the location should probably be there as well. I mean, I think we're seeing 3G go away, so technology has to advance, at least in some areas, right? So and there are some other technologies that are tethered, right? So you have a tracker that's tethered to your phone, et cetera. But if it doesn't get a signal wherever you are, it's not helpful, right? And it's gonna go away. So I worked in one location. Everybody's like, hey, we have this phone that's going to be awesome. Everybody's going to use it, and it'll just do everything you need it to do, except it didn't connect to the phone network, so it never worked, and it was just a brick. And like you said, all the executives kind of left it in their room. So that's not helpful. So we have to understand. Again, that would be from my perspective at the strategic level, what tools will work in the location that we're going to. And just like that was talked about in the OSINT thing before, it's not just a hey, I used to tickle the keys, I GTS it, and then suddenly I know everything. It's like you said, it's ringing that rag and trying to get as much intel out of that as possible. And then every time I do that, I'm adding to that stack of intelligence that I know about the area. So, does the network work? Will our tools work? What assets do we have on the ground to give us real-time intelligence that, those folks that are trusted? And then, of course, do the people have training, not necessarily what to think, but how to think about approaching our operation on the ground from a travel perspective? Okay, so I think we're just up on time. I would just say closing remarks, just a quick sentence. Marcus, just a quick sentence. Okay, we're going to try to keep to this. And we'll start with Marcus, and then we'll go from there. Marcus, so closing remarks, one sentence to sum it all up, sir.
Think about who your end user is.
There it is. One sentence. All right, good. Pair.
Have a different primary method than technology.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Yvonne.
We can't follow always the standards because the standards of executive protection change in any country, so not necessarily follow the standards.
Okay. Axel.
I think it's all about the people. It was mentioned before, those two tiers, the executive travelers that are in a safe bubble, and then the individual traveler. And for them, it's not so much about tech, it's about awareness, preparation, and a bit of decent training. And again, it was mentioned, online training sometimes is very basic, very badly done. So focus on a bit more of training. It helps people.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you very much for the words of wisdom from the gentleman on the panel. Please give him a round of applause, and thank you for your attention.
I really enjoyed that panel with the one and only Mr. Chris Story moderating, not just because, well, it's Chris Story moderating in a UK environment, so that's pretty special. And for those of you who remember, of course, Chris was a guest intro-outro moderator on the podcast just the other week, as well as a guest, of course, last year. But because what we did, we took travel risk and we related it to current affairs, but we also put a slant on it and asked where can technology help and where perhaps not. Because everyone will remember, the last few years there's been some pretty out there travel risk conundrums. And, trusted sources were no longer trusted. And then other places were opening and some places were closing. And yes, I'm being deliberately vague. I'm not trying to add to this panel myself too much, but I think you get the picture. So the question of travel risk, was it ever predictable? Right? Does it make sense to talk about unpredictability? And then what can you do to mitigate that? The advance work, all of the preparation. Because if it is unpredictable, what are you really planning for? You're planning for outcomes. You're planning for scenarios. And, Chris also mentioned how international that panel was. Mexican, United States, German, and Swedish on that particular panel. But overall, the event, we were so fortunate to have people from the Middle East, from South Africa, a friend of the NABA network coming from South Africa as well, from Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and, of course, Canada, not just Germany, but Ireland, Netherlands, France. Yes, our fantastic BBA members from France and the Netherlands. I remember having some great chats with you. So please do continue your support and please do continue coming over. Oh, and New Zealand. New Zealand was in the house. I should not forget you. But, yeah, so I made a special plea at the end of the event for people to subscribe. And if coincidentally this is the first time you are hearing the Circuit Magazine podcast, on account of my encouragement, thank you very much for subscribing. It was such a wonderful day and evening, and of course pre-drinks courtesy of the IPSB. And what I would love to do is to spread the enthusiasm, keep the momentum coming, and if you have a story, a case study, something you want to share, as some very kind protectors who approached us did, we want to include it in the next issue of the magazine. We're already including segments from people who very kindly came up at the end of the event and had something prepared for us. So if that's you, thank you. And if you're thinking about it, absolutely jump on the bandwagon. So beyond this, what have we got coming up? Well, we have a series of virtual events that we will be announcing, which will be there for you to engage in. That will be thematic. We are very much looking forward, of course, to Elijah's training course coming up very soon too. We mentioned that on one of the previous editions. And, of course, we are looking forward to meeting you all in person at various stages. Please do keep an ear out for further segments from the 8th Annual Executive Security and Close Protection Technology Forum. Please do network with the people that you met. Don't forget to contact them sooner rather than later so that they remember you if you were attending. If you weren't attending, I do apologize. We did sell out a few days before, even though we increased the space. We will endeavor to cater for you, especially next time. But get in there early. And I know that can be difficult with schedules, but if you can, get in early for 2024, for the 9th iteration. I can't believe we're saying the 9th. Big thank you to the supporters of the event, and of course our long-standing chairman, Mr. Mike O'Neill, Managing Director, Optimal Risk, who is a big friend of the magazine and the association as well. And one just mini shout out to my fellow co-presenter Elijah Shaw. Even though you were there remotely, it was great that we were chatting in real time and connecting with members from across the pond in person. And of course, because of this segment, thank you very much to Chris Story, Conversations in Close Protection, IPSB, and our fantastic panel, Axel, Iva, Per, and of course Marcus. This has been Unpredictable Travel Risk Management, as captured at the 8th Annual Executive Security and Close Protection Technology Forum in the Grand Connaught Rooms in London just this week. My name is Pelham Rowe, and this has been, for me, a fantastically special edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.